It's time for the Rich Kaplan Aviation Report, and folks, let me just set the stage for this. Last night, I was out with the family. I was at an Italian restaurant, Phil's in Massapequa, and on the News 12 screen it said, flight from Greece to Philadelphia, American Airlines flight, 10 people injured, severe turbulence. I said, this is right up Rich Kaplan's alley. I know he'll knock it out of the park. So without any further ado, to tell us in detail what happened on this flight, Rich Kaplan.
Thank you, Howie, and hello again, everybody. Basically, what happened was you have an American Airlines flight landed after experiencing severe turbulence shortly before landing, sending 10 people to the hospital for their injuries, 3 passengers and 7 crew members. Now, it's crucial that it was 7 crew members, and I'm going to explain why that was crucial in a moment. Crew members were rushed to local hospitals after a shaky flight from Greece to Philadelphia on Saturday afternoon. I can't even read my own handwriting. The shaky inbound plane encountered severe turbulence right before Flight 759 touched down at Philadelphia International Airport. Flight attendants were just serving out drinks when the turbulence hit. The plane lurched violently forward and plunged. Now, what's interesting about this is that the plane was 30 minutes out of Philadelphia, 30 minutes from landing when this happened. Flight attendants were just handing out the drinks before the plane lurched violently forward, causing drinks to go flying and people slamming their heads in the ceiling of the aircraft. Passengers described the event as terrifying, and one claims a flight attendant dislocated his shoulder in the commotion. Now, once again, I want to state the plane was only 30 minutes from arrival when the turbulence took place. There was no time for the flight attendants to get to their seats before the plane violently lurched. The plane arrived at 3:10, but was scheduled originally to arrive at 3:45. Now, I can explain in detail in a minute exactly why this happened and my theory as to what went wrong. First of all, this is a 777-200. The aircraft involved was the larger 300. Now, there were 287 people on board, 12 crew members. Now, let me detach the aircraft from its stand because I'm going to demonstrate to you exactly what turbulence is. Turbulence is when an airplane is either on ascent or descent. It experiences the clouds in the sky. Now, we always see the clouds and we figure, oh, they're so beautiful, they're fluffy, they're harmless. Not the case. To an airplane, a cloud is your worst nightmare because it gets sucked into the engine and it causes a disruption of flow in the air, and that's why the aircraft lurched so violently. When you have a disruption of flow on a jet engine, if you look inside, I want to have my videographer pan in, you can see the intake. You can see the engine's fan blades and so forth. Those blades are spinning at a massive, massive rate of speed, sucking air. That's what they do. They suck in air. The more air that gets sucked in, the smoother the flight. Well, in the case of Flight 759, what you had was a situation where the air now became its enemy. In the sense that the clouds, you're flying through, you're skimming at about 300, 400 miles an hour, maybe more. You have the air violently disrupted. And the airflow in a jet engine, when it is disrupted, can be very, very violent. In this case, my theory is the plane lurched forward, lurched about, and then plunged a little, ascended a little bit, the pilot's fighting to get control of the aircraft. We're very lucky that this happened on the plane that it did, because a 777 is a very large aircraft, as you can see. And American has a pretty sizable fleet of them. What I like about the 777 is it has a fly-by-wire system and it's redundant, meaning that the pilot is always in control of the aircraft, even with the autopilot engaged. What happened here is that the airplane was out of its element. In other words, instead of having smooth air, now you have rough air. You probably had a thunderstorm. Who knows what the weather was in Philly that day? I'd have to check. But I can tell you, if the weather was inclement, it played a huge role in what happened, Howie, because you have engines that are sucking in fuel. In this case, you only have 2 engines. You have one on the right and one on the left. If one of those engines gets compromised, the plane can still fly on one engine and limp back to Philadelphia safely. In this case, that was not the case because the pilots were able to keep the engines going, keep the plane going, and thus you didn't have that situation where you had what's known as a microburst, which is very severe turbulent air that can actually force the airplane into the ground, as in the case of Delta Airlines Flight 191, I believe it was in Dallas, Fort Worth, where you had a L-1011 that got slammed into the ground from what a combination of wake turbulence and microburst. So I have to say that I got to commend the pilots of American because they were trained, they knew exactly what to do, got the aircraft on the ground safely. Only 10 people were hurt, no one was killed. That's miraculous considering how severe the turbulence is in this particular part of the United States. You get a lot of rough air, Howie. The Air Force actually likes it because their planes arrive early because of it. As in the case of this plane arrived 40 minutes early. The Air Force happens to like this kind of air because it's called tailwinds. And we've all heard of tailwinds. That's when the tail of the aircraft is doing most of the work and you get the winds pushing the plane at a further rate of speed than it's normally flying at. So this jet was probably cruising, I'm going to take a guess, at around 400, 500 miles an hour when it experienced the turbulence. The pilots knew exactly what to do, got the aircraft under control. The flight attendants, yeah, they were probably shaken up. The passengers were shaken up. But in the end, no one was killed. And that's what's most important, Howie.
Well, you know, it brought back memories for me because I once had about 6 years ago a flight from Cleveland, Ohio to New York City, New York. And that flight was severe turbulence. And I got to tell you, it was a scary moment. You feel like you're bouncing up and down. It was very, very scary. Very stressful. And I can imagine that had to be much worse. And you know, especially people bouncing up and down, hitting the ceiling, drinks flying all over the place. People were probably hysterical, screaming, "We're gonna die." So I can imagine that flight from Greece to Philadelphia, people were in sheer panic.
Absolutely, Howie, absolutely. It's fear of the unknown. It's one of the main reasons why a lot of people are afraid to fly, because you hear stories about this. But the fact of the matter is, all turbulence really is, people, is just clouds getting sucked into the jet engine, causing the plane to lose altitude and to pitch violent. It is not uncommon. We hear about it a lot, Howie, and more we're going to be hearing about this because we're approaching winter, we're approaching hurricane season. We'll be hearing a lot about it. But what makes this particular story so fascinating is the fact that it was such a large aircraft and the pilots knew exactly what they were doing as they were trained to do. And that's what's most important.
Great job, Rich. You know, we gave Rich this story this morning. He did a phenomenal job with his research, brought in the plane, did a great job telling people out there who might not be knowledgeable exactly what turbulence is, talked about the flight in detail. So phenomenal job, Rich Kaplan, on a flight that, thank God, everyone survived. Great job, Rich.
Thank you, Howie.
All right.